Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Hypersonic55, and after quite some time not going about doing any reviews, I come back again with a new review, and it comes in the form of Sonic Generations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me go about and put this to you right now. Ever since the first trailer came out back in April 2011, I have been waiting and waiting and waiting for this game. I have watched every preview, I've seen every trailer at least over 5 times, and so after all this waiting, was Sonic Generations worth the effort? Pretty much, it was pretty damn awesome. Sonic Generations happens to be a love letter of a game to the fans of the series, highlighting all of Sonic's big moments in the world of gaming since his early days on the Sega Mega Drive / Genesis up until present times on consoles like the Nintendo Wii, Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. It's a game full of nostalgia from not only the levels but to the cutscenes of the story and the use of music and the types of challenge missions that you happen to go through in the entire game. I consider the game like looking through an old photo album and remembering and celebrating what you love in life, really. The game isn't perfect, however. It does have its problems here and there, but there is a level of awesomeness and nostalgia in the game that is just so good. It more or less outweighs the bad in so many ways, by miles. And while I can't say it's the best Sonic game in the world, in my opinion, it's still a pretty damn good effort, and after the game was finished, I was left smiling. Now, in terms of the story, one day Sonic and his friends happen to be celebrating Sonic's birthday when a mysterious dark entity shows up and starts creating holes in time, sucking up everybody into different dimensions and tearing time apart. Sonic then finds himself in a white dimension where everything is lifeless and lacking in colour. And while he goes through the different worlds of his past, he happens to restore the colour to those worlds, also finding his friends along the way, and even run into his former self, and eventually he has to figure out who is behind the whole time collapse in the first place, and restore it before everything just falls into chaos. Now overall the story was alright. To be honest, there were so many nice in-jokes and references to the past, you couldn't help but smile, laugh and just admire the way in which the writers have gone about and put all this nice effort and fan service in there for the fans. The story isn't all perfect though. There is some questionable voice acting for some of the voice actors involved, and there is some very poor dialogue written for some of these characters. And compared to Sonic's last two adventures, like in Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors, the story doesn't feel all that big or as magnificent as it could have done. It really could have been something really amazing, purely because it's Sonic's 20th anniversary. I thought they pushed the whole boat out for the story, but I guess in this case, less is more. But enough about the story. You don't really want to hear about that. What you really want to hear about is the gameplay, right? You want to know if it's good or bad. And to be honest, it's pretty good. I can safely say that. Sometimes it's absolutely amazing, in fact, but sometimes it's really frustrating in a good number of scenarios. But that really does depend on what Sonic you are and what level you're playing at the time. So what I'm going to do now is going to go about and describe my opinions of both Sonics, taking into account the gameplay, handling, level design, and difficulty. Now with Classic Sonic, you're getting the classic 2D gameplay reinvented in a 3D graphical makeover rendered in HD, and the gameplay result is an incredible one. This is the Sonic from 1992, from his days in Sonic 2, with a few new features here and there. Playing a Sonic in 2D hasn't felt this good in forever. Not since the Mega Drive days have I ever felt a true sense of speed when you're going about and using the spin dash downhill, and feel the momentum carrying you along. Long before this game had come out, the most important factor on everybody's minds was the physics. Luckily, Classic Sonic's physics are up to scratch. They are miles ahead of Sonic 4, and feel just about as close as you're going to get to the originals in a 3D format. Now when it comes to the level design of Classic Sonic, everything is in full effect here. His levels are nostalgic, well crafted, and are just a blast to play. Now when it comes to the levels in specific, Green Hill Zone obviously comes to mind, and it really is the best level in the game. It can be played over and over and over, and it can never get boring. Also, the reworked version of the Chemical Plant Zone also kicks ass in so many fantastic ways, with the look and feel being preserved very well here and feeling so similar to the original. But when I think Classic Sonic really comes alive is when he happens to tackle some of the levels in the Dreamcast and modern era of gaming, with Speed Highway being one of my absolute favourites. The way in which that's been restructured is wicked, and the Classic Sonic version of City Escape is pretty darn good. And even though Crisis City is god-awfully hard, I actually find myself liking that level a fair amount. Now when it comes to the difficulty of Classic Sonic's levels, I think it's safe to say that everything starts out easy and progresses as you go along, and then you happen to find the harder areas towards the latter half of the game. But in the end, Classic Sonic kicks a lot of ass, and I find that you'll probably be playing as him for quite some time. You feel invincible once you happen to find your feet in the game, and the classic levels definitely outshine the modern ones because they are well balanced and they happen to have so much nostalgia in there that one cannot ignore it. So now that you've heard me talk so much about classic Sonic, you're probably expecting me to say that modern Sonic sucked or was really terrible. Well, I'm not. He was actually pretty much the opposite. Modern Sonic is pretty darn incredible, and there happens to be a great sense of speed and adrenaline rush once you happen to go about and play as him. Even though a lot of his levels require a lot of boosting and homing attacks, it does pay off as the game is definitely designed around the factors of speed, platforming and technique, and it all comes off in a spectacular fashion. When it comes to the handling of modern Sonic, those of you who would have played Sonic Unleashed will feel right at home here. Possibly some of you that would have played Sonic Colors would feel pretty much at home here as well. The homing attack is tight and responsive, well, at least 90% of the time, and the new trick system in the game happens to work like a charm as well, being very addictive, and blasting around at breakneck speeds with the boost happens to feel so satisfying. The difficulty of modern Sonic happens to come across fair at times, then switching to be unruly, to then being just downright unfair. If you're not too careful towards the latter half of the game, that's when the game happens to become very frustrating, very fast, and the cruel deaths just happen to keep coming over and over and over. Though if you happen to persevere and refine your skills, the game does become a good blast to play. However, the later levels in the game, as I mentioned before, are very questionable in content, and they happen to suffer from the same familiar problems that Sonic has faced since Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors and some of the Sonic Rush games as well, like bad enemy placement, questionable platforming areas, strange level design, and all too common pitfalls. However, for better or for worse, Modern Sonic is still pretty good to play, and I'd say Modern Sonic's best levels are Green Hill Zone, the Chemical Plant Zone, Speed Highway, and City Escape. Now, over the course of the game, both Sonics will have to face bosses from their past, and while the bosses seem to come across as fun sometimes, a good number of them are just dead confusing. Without the help of Omochao, you would literally be lost in the woods sometimes, and some of the fights just come across as far too anticlimactic, really. You can literally hit them a few times and then bang, it's all over. It's just like, what happened? It was just really annoying to go about and get in a groove of things only to find out, oh yeah, the boss is over. Criminy. And one thing has to be mentioned now. The last boss in the game is probably one of the worst bosses in Sonic history. It is long, tedious, and just a right pain in the arse, really. If you ever happen to go about and fight this thing, just go about and do it the once and never look back. Now, when it comes to the presentation of Sonic Generations, it definitely doesn't seem to disappoint here. Graphically speaking, the game looks pretty damn wonderful. The game is sharp and colourful and just oozing with character and charm. The game's graphical highlights is definitely seeing the classic Mega Drive levels redesigned and updated. The levels just happen to feel so wonderful, and there's many nods to the past and little intricate details in the foreground and background taken into consideration when looking at these stages like Green Hill Zone, the Chemical Plant Zone, and especially the Sky Sanctuary too. Even the Dreamcast levels look fabulous in the game as well, with Speed Highway and City Escape looking amazing and just brimming with life and nostalgia. And to be honest, I've always wanted a HD remake of City Escape, and the end result in Sonic Generations has just made me so happy. And on the whole, the game looks pretty amazing. There's no pre-rendered cutscenes like in Sonic Unleashed or Sonic Colors, completely contrary to the trailers that were preceding this game. And I feel like the production values were a lot higher in Sonic Unleashed as well. That's not to say that it'll put you off the game. I'm surprised the graphics just haven't been pushed all the way to the maximum, really. But what's probably more impressive than the graphics and the audio, the soundtrack of Sonic Generations is just completely jam-packed with music from the past in every corner of Sonic's library, from when you're actually in the levels to the menus to the in-menus from there, and then when you get to collect music, you then put them all on different levels as well, because you get to pick the music that you get to play on different levels. It's just amazing. So now it comes to the longevity of the game, and for me it is not nearly enough. Compared to all the other Sonic games that I've happened to play in recent times, this happens to feel like the shortest one. And even though there are 9 levels made up of 2 acts in each, along with a good number of bosses and how many different challenge acts to go through, which is all well and good, I found myself a little underwhelmed once I started to plow through the game. The challenge missions as well, while they're meant to be something that expands the lifespan of the game, it really just feels like a task to plow through some of those. Some of them would just come across as tedious, cheap additions that the developers didn't put a lot of proper care into. And while some of them are really cool and feel very nice with nostalgia and all that, a lot of them are just pointless and you don't really want to go about and do them. For me, yeah, I reckon that this game really should have had a Chao Garden in there. And if they had returned the Chao in Sonic Generations, I would have been so complete. That would have just sold me right there and then. But there's no Chao Garden, so there is no long-term gameplay in Sonic Generations outside of the additional stuff that you can go about and do now. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, Sonic Generations still happens to be a pretty damn good game. In a lot of ways, it happened to meet my expectations and exceed my expectations in a lot of places, and had a lot of surprises for me to happen to find and enjoy. I replay so many stages over and over just to try and discover more runs, get faster times, or just get a lot more of those red rings lurking around as well. There's always something different to go about and do, and messing around with the music in there is just wonderful. The presentation is lovely in the graphical sense and the audio sense. The game may not be perfect, but it's pretty damn close. For true blue Sonic fans, this game is a must. Overall, I'm going to go about and give the game an 8.5, which I think is a fairly decent rating, to be honest. Well, that's been my review of Sonic Generations, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed the review I gave you today, and look out for the next one when it happens to show up. So until the next time, this is the Hypersonic 55 signing out.